Thank you, guys. Here you go.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. My name is Marisol Gonzalez. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the graduate coordinator for community standards.
And hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Yzagguire. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the assistant community director of Joe Greenhall.
We're going to talk about incident report writing with you guys today. We just want you to please feel comfortable to ask questions in the chat. There's going to be people monitoring the chat. Just make sure that just ask questions. If you have them, we will address them as we receive them. And if you're ready, we will just continue.
So what are incident reports? So they are how we document situations that occur in the residence halls, and they are needed because they give a clear description of everything that happened and who was involved in a certain situation, and they're used by staff members who will be meeting up or following up with the involved parties. Latoya later on is going to go further into the importance of incident report writing.
Yes, so what are some examples of incidents that need IRs? We know right now that there's 228 of us, so it's impossible for us to all of us talk about it. But for the veteran RAs, if you can just mention in the chat, like what type of scenarios you have encountered in your communities. This is very important just to get for the other RAs, like the rookie RAs, to get a feeling of what type of scenarios they can encounter, or they will be able to see during their own calls. However, just also keep in mind that with COVID, we don't really know what's going to happen, like if there are going to be like more parties, or it's going to be more scenarios about like students in crisis. Like there's different things that could happen in the on campus, and of course in the resident halls, but just keep that in mind. So if you don't, we will just give you a couple minutes so people can start writing. Okay, so thank you. Yes, police in building is one. Underage drinking is another one. I know for example, maintenance, it's sometimes we have problems with toilets or lights are out. So it could be different things. Sexual misconduct, yes. Fire alarm, confiscated items, sure. Yes, having to call 911 and the University of North Texas Police Department as well for medical emergencies. It's something that we might encounter. Yeah, those are great options. Thank you so much for physical assault, roommate conflict. That happens multiple times because sometimes people are not used to live with others. Like they might be residents or who are only child, so they are not used to like having the same space or share certain things. So people being stuck in the elevator, yes, vandalism. Those are great examples. So thank you guys for sharing.
And you can go over examples in your in-hall time if you'd like of certain situations that you've had to encounter. Just remember not to go into too specific of detail or mention any names. Also, I'd like to apologize in advance. I am working from home, so if you hear my cat, I am very sorry. So now we're going to be going over some housing and residence life procedure regarding incident report writing. So make sure to write the report immediately after the incident occurred. We understand it could be late at night, but we ask and kind of mandate that you write it immediately just because the details will be fresh in your mind and you'll know all the information.
Yes, also as Ashley mentioned, it's very imperative that you actually write it like immediately afterwards because one, everything is fresh in your mind, and also we can get the resources or the assistance that the student needs like immediately. For example, let's say that there's a student in crisis or something happened to them, the care report team can be like contact them in the morning, or if we have like a Title IX situation, so or if there's like a flood, we need maintenance to know. So we want to make sure that you write the report as soon as possible, and also make sure that every staff involved writes a separate report. And this is also important, and we don't want let's say that there's a situation 3 RAs were involved, like involved I mean like they help with the situation, so each one of them will write an IR. And this is important because we are going to see the perspective from the RA. So let's say that somebody started writing the IR or they were involved in the situation at 7 at night, and then the next person came at 9:15. So there's a gap there. So we want to make sure like what the first RA covered and what happened to the next one. So if you're writing the IR together, we want to make sure that it's not a copy paste type of thing. We don't need to have 3 IRs written exactly the same way, like word by word. Sometimes the spellings are also shared. We want to make sure that it's your perspective and just make sure that everybody who's involved, it could be an RA, a CD, an ACD, the RA on call, the part-time desk clerk. So everybody who had some sort of involvement will have to write an IR.
Sorry about that, my cat is here. So any person listed in the text of the IR should be listed as a person involved, so under parties involved, except for staff members. So say you are a resident assistant who is working a situation, thank you, Apollo. You would not put yourself listed under involved parties. Those are for only the individuals who were involved. So whether that is someone who was affected by anything, you're just the staff who is working it.
You want to make sure that you write in third person. And yes, we know that this is very awkward. It seems very egocentric. We're not used to it, but we want to make sure that this is important to write in third person, because remember, somebody else is going to be reading this report at the next day or in a couple hours, depending on when it happened. And that person might not know anything about it. So they're going to come like fresh. So they don't have any details. So if you start using like Marisol said, she said, he said, we said, they say, I said, it's like, well, at the end of the day, who did what, who said what? So want to make sure that it's in third person.
And then describe your observations rather than your opinions. So your opinions do matter, but when writing an incident report, we ask that you write the observations and the facts that happened during the incident. And then if you have any opinions based on the incident that occurred, whether you've had a previous experience with it, always talk to your community director or your assistant community director.
And you want to make sure that if UNTPD, like the University of North Texas Police Department, was involved, you want to make sure that you have the police officer's name. Sometimes, most of the times, like I will say 99% of the time, the officer will actually give you their business cards, but if for some reason they don't, you're allowed to ask them like, hey, may I have your information? I'm going to need it for the report. The other thing you can ask them is their badge number. So you can add it on the report as well on your IR. And if applicable, you might need a case number. This one in particular might not be like, you might not get this number because the situation just happened. They haven't created a case yet, but that's when you contact the community director on call and they can contact UNTPD directly and get the case number, and then the CD will give it to you. Or this goes back to every staff writes a report. So the CD on call will write a report that will include the police number, and yours wouldn't, okay?
And then make sure to proofread the incident report before you submit it. This is really, really important because there could be grammatical errors. You could accidentally mix up someone's title. So whether you meant to put resident assistant but accidentally put resident, that information is super important. So make sure to proofread the IR before you submit it 1 or 2 times. If it's during work hours and it is your first incident report, you can always ask your assistant community director or community director to look through it just in case to make sure you have the correct information.
Yes, and use correct grammar and spelling, and we will recommend that you use Microsoft Word for this, because you don't want to use the browser, like in this case in Maxine, where you're writing the report, because many of us have the issue where it stopped working, like the internet got disconnected, and then you have to start all over again. So if you use a platform just like Word, in this case, you will, or a software like Word, you can just use it for spelling. Also, you have it in case that internet stops working or Maxine stopped working, and then you can just copy paste your what you wrote in Word and then just report it on Maxine's website.
And then last but not least is be as descriptive as possible. Some things may seem super small and irrelevant, but in reality, it could make a big deal. And so whether it's the number of items in a room or a number of people involved, anything like that, make sure to be as descriptive as possible in the details that occurred during the incident.
Now, when I started working for housing, I didn't have any housing experience. I'm from Mexico, so I live like 3 or 4 blocks away from a university, so I could just walk or take the bus. So since I live at home, I didn't really live in the resident hall. I didn't have an RA. I didn't really know what an RA was. And when I started working for housing, they were transitioning between hall director to community director. So there were a lot of acronyms thrown like to us. So we wanted to give you the important acronyms that you want to be aware of. Also, you do have a handout or information that you already received. So make sure that you go through the documents that you received because there's important information for you to be aware. So in this case, PTDC is part-time desk clerk. The RA URAs are a resident assistant. There's part-time desk clerks in this presentation. So just make sure that you're familiar with them: assistant community director on call, CD, etc. So you just make sure that we didn't include facility assistants or FAs or HAs, which are housing ambassadors. So just make sure that you're familiar with the acronyms that the Housing and Residence Lab use daily. And now we're going to tell you like tips and tricks for writing IRs.
So the first is for staff members. So for the first time when you write an IR, refer to a staff member, whether it is yourself or anyone else. Use the person's entire job title. So if I was writing a IR, I would put Assistant Community Director Ashley Yzagguire. And then after the first time you mention a staff member is when you can refer to them by their abbreviated title that was listed in the previous slide and use their last name. So when I'm first writing my IR, I would say Assistant Community Director Ashley Yzagguire, and then in the next sentence, I would use ACD Yzagguire. So keep that in mind.
Can I add something to that, Ashley?
Yes.
Can you go back for one? Hey everyone. So the reason for this also is that it makes it a lot easier for the people who are receiving the reports to really understand what's going on. So when we talk in the third person, then it's easier for me to follow the story, or even if it's a Title IX thing, it's easier for us to really put together what is happening. So that's why we asked for that. Sorry, thanks.
Thanks, Latoya.
So as Ashley and Latoya mentioned, in the case for residents, the first time that you make a reference for a resident, you will write their whole name as listed in the intranet and the, so you use what is written on the internet, but in this case, I'm sorry, just somebody enter and I'm trying to admit them. So if you have resident Hermione Granger, the next time that you address the resident in the IR body or the narrative, it will just be resident Granger. Or in my case, if I'm the community director on call that night, it will say community director on call Marisol Gonzalez. The next time that I write about it, it will be CDOC Gonzalez.
And then we had questions, at least I had questions last year on individuals who don't use the name on the intranet anymore. So that's their dead name, or they have a preferred name that is their name. And so for that case, we ask that you put the name listed on the intranet, and then after that say, but they go by, or their actual name is. So for example, if I prefer to go by Charlie, the Marisol would write resident Ashley Yzagguire, who goes by Charlie Yzagguire. That way, the person reading the report knows that information, because say they have to get in contact with that resident and the resident doesn't feel comfortable with the name Ashley, they know that, no, their name is Charlie. Like, that is the name they go by. That is their name. I know to use that now and to not make them uncomfortable. And if you have any further questions on that, please feel free to ask either Marisol or I, or Latoya as well. And then for individuals who have the same last name when writing reports, make sure to put their full name. So say my last name is also Gonzalez, Marisol would write, and we were both residents, so someone would write, Latoya would write, residents Ashley Yzagguire and resident Marisol Gonzalez for the entire report. Does that seem like a lot? Yes, but that's needed because two individuals have the same last name, and we want to make sure that we are getting the correct information on those who are involved.
Another way of adding the proper name to someone's report is, for instance, with Ashley's example, you can put Ashley and then in parentheses Charlie, close the parentheses and put Yzagguire. Did I say it right, Ashley?
Yes, you did.
Yay. And then you can continue on with the incident, and then we will know that Charlie is that resident's name.
And so now we're going to be going over pronouns. So using pronouns such as she, her, he, him, they, and them, and all others. make the IR very confusing. So instead use names and last names. Like we've said before, pronouns are really important in day-to-day life, but during incident reports, we want it to be easier to read. And so we ask to not use pronouns. And so we do have some examples, so I'll read them for y'all. So the one that is incorrect is resident Ronald Weasley told him that he was concerned for Hermione Granger because she was crying in her bathroom. He then escorted him into her room. He asked her why she was crying, and she told him that she had drank something that made her feel sick. Since she was not feeling well, she told him that she had ... And the correct one is resident Ronald Weasley informed resident assistant Harry Potter that resident Hermione Granger was not feeling well. Resident Weasley proceeded to escort R.A. Potter to room 123. R.A. Potter introduced themselves and asked resident Granger if they would prefer to speak with a female staff member, to which resident Granger said no. R.A. Potter proceeded to ask resident Granger ... And so for this situation, or for this example, the one at the bottom is correct, but also I made a spelling mistake where at the bottom where it says R.A. Potter, the Potter should be capitalized. And so I should have proofread that and made sure. And so that's a little example of making sure you read through it, you don't use pronouns, and that if you do have any questions regarding incident reports, to always ask up and to ask people.
So you want to make sure, as Ashley mentioned, capitalize resident when it's used as a title of a resident as well as their name and last name. So in the case of resident Granger, it needs to be capitalized, but if you're talking about some residents outside, which is very general, you don't have a specifics, that will not be capitalized.
And then when referring to parents or legal guardians, write the resident's name and then the name of the guardian. So for example, resident Ronald Weasley's mother, Molly Weasley. And for that, always make sure you don't make assumptions on people's titles because that is not right. So if you see an individual who might look like someone's parent or guardian, don't make assumptions on it. You can ask them, be like, hey, is this your mother or father? Or is this one of your legal guardians? Or is it your sibling? Because the answer could be different. That could be their aunt or uncle. That could be their cousin. That could be a family friend. So make sure not to make assumptions, but if you do know that the individual with your resident is, or a resident is a legal guardian or parent, make sure to list the resident's name and then the individual's title and name.
Mm-hmm. We actually just got a question in the chat. It says, if the REOC and CDOC are both male and the resident prefer to speak to a female, who will we contact? So in this case, as an RA on call or an RA, you will contact the CD on call and the CD on call will make that call. So that we do have two CD on calls at the same time. So we have area A and area B. So it might be the case that the area, let's say that this specific CD is for area B and the CD OC for area A is a female, so we will bring that person. If not, we will find a staff member who will be able to assist the, or who will need a female staff member, okay? So the next one is it okay to group residents together with one residence with an S at the end, so plural. So residents Ranger, Weasley, Potter, and Lovegood were in the hallway. Now you notice that we did include Potter there, but we're not talking about the same Harry Potter, so he's not the resident assistant, so he's not the RA, it could be James or Fred or Francis, like it could be somebody else. And this goes back to what Ashley mentioned, that if you do have residents with the same last name as other residents or as the RA or the part-time desk clerk, etc., you wanna make sure that you utilize those titles. So in the case of residents, the resident is their title, okay?
And then make sure to quote what people say exactly and completely, even if the word seems offensive, vulgar, or embarrassing, because once again, this information is being sent out to individuals who are going to be following up with the individuals involved in the situation. So even if it seems vulgar or embarrassing or offensive, that information is important, so it can be brought up during the follow-up discussion.
Yes, and you want to ask IDs or use the web raster to correctly spell the names. Sometimes when you're in the situation, if the resident is not a resident from your hall, let's say it's from Kerr and you have a resident from Honors, you want to make sure that you ask that information because as an RA or as a part-timer, you might not have access to the roster from a different hall. So it's okay to ask for IDs. At the same time, if the person there is not UNT related, so they're not students, they're not residents, you do need that information. If they don't give you that information, you're allowed to ask them for it, because as a university official or representative, you do have the authority to request an ID. If they still don't comply, you can ask them to leave the building and or inform them that because they're not complying with what you're telling them, they have to leave the building, or you will need to contact UNTPD so they are escorted outside.
And the next is to make sure you include the correct time and date of the incident that occurred. Sorry, very loud, there's a car outside. So the date and time that the incident occurred. So say a resident comes to you and said, yesterday I started feeling really sick and I was at the union and I felt like I was gonna throw up or something like that, and I'm really concerned. You would put the date that the incident occurred with the resident, that they were feeling sick yesterday and unwell, or they hurt their ankle or anything like that. So make sure to include the correct time and date, not the time and date where you're writing the incident report.
And be as clear as possible in your writing. Remember, somebody else is going to be reading this and they might not know exactly what happened. They were not there. So they're going to be reading or knowing about the information through your eyes in third person writing. So make sure that it's clear as possible.
And lastly, again, we are repeating things because they are really important, is to be objective and include only the facts. Your opinions remain important and are super important, but that is for a separate discussion with your community director or assistant community director. The incident report should only state the facts and objective details.
We just got a question that says, for dates, will you date and time is as when they talk with you and then include within the report times they feel sick? We're actually going to address that in like a couple minutes. So we will just hold that question for a second, okay? So we're going to talk about now with housing intranet. So Ashley, thank you. So make sure that you're familiar with housing intranet. We're going to let you know how to access the internet, but make sure that before you start doing your own calls, you want to have access to it. You want to get familiar with the website. You want to know like what exactly is on the internet, what you can click on it, what you can't, like what you have access to. And don't be afraid to click on things. We don't really have the authority to change anything on the internet anyways. So clicking things is not going to change anything on the website. So Ashley, if you can go to the next one, please.
Yes, and also for the housing internet, make sure you have access to it. So give that a test run as well. I remember for my first situation that I had to go to, it was a flood at Kerr. What's up, Kerr? I had to write an incident report and I still did not have access to the intranet. And so I had to use someone else's intranet in order to like go through the process. And so before anything happens or a situation occurs, make sure to check that you do have access to the housing intranet.
So we just got another question that says, are we writing IRs if residents feel sick? The answer is yes, and we will address it also in a second. So this is what it looks like. You can visit the internet by typing housinginternet.unt.edu. You can also use your cell phone or your tablet or your personal computer. If that's the case, you just need to go to vpn2.unt.edu. That is like a safe browser that you can use from your cell phone. And that's something that you can do. Like if you're actually, something is happening, you need to check their emergency protocol, you can access it through, or the roster, you can access from your cell phone. Now you will use your UNT username, which is your EU ID, the one that has letter and numbers, and your password, the one that you use for everything else at UNT.
And then in also addition to this, when typing into the URL bar or even the bar in the VPN thing, make sure to always put HTTPS and then the information. And then this is the housing intranet. So this is what it looks like. And so we highlighted a little bit some important tabs. So the web rosters, the conduct and incidents tab, the emergency response tab, and the floor plans, as well as the calendars, which list who is on call for the areas. So we are going to go a little bit more in depth on the conduct and incidents tab. So step 2, after going on the intranet, making sure you have access, is clicking on the conduct and incidents tab, which we highlighted here. And we're going to be going over the incident reporting flow chart. So that is located under incident reporting.
We just got a question that says, for a non-UNT student or a non-resident, what title would you suggest we use? Exactly what you wrote, like non-UNT student. Brown or Marisol Gonzalez, if that's the case. We will also touch that in a second. But this slide is actually very important. That's the incident reporting flowchart. This is something that you want to make sure that you're familiar with. It is on the intranet, but you also should have a copy of it. I know that front desks have a copy of it, like printed copy. These are, if you see it on the screen, it has 6 columns, and you want to make sure that you're familiar with it. It doesn't have all the possible scenarios you can encounter. It's impossible to write them all. However, it does have an extensive list of something that you could have, or it could happen, or we have seen multiple times. Now, the one that is highlighted in green is only for CDs and ACDs, but the other 5, you want to make sure that you're familiar with it. So just make sure that each column will have their own link. So make sure that you go through it. It's the part on top, it says residence hall incident report. You have a maintenance one, you have a care report, the student misconduct, and the last one to the right is a sexual misconduct or Title IX. This is important that you know and you get familiar to each column, because it, depending on which link you select, it's the person who's going to receive that document. Thank you, Ashley. So let's say that you have a Title IX incident, so it's a sexual misconduct, it's a stalking, something similar, but you send it to housing maintenance. That it is actually like problematic, because our Craig Simmons, who is our Associate Director for Residential Facilities, should not receive that information. At the same time, if you have maintenance, but you send it to the care report, well, then Craig will, and his team is not going to get the report for maintenance. It will be sent to someone else. So it's very important you actually select the one that you need. So once that you know which report is better suited, and if you don't know, you can always ask. You can call the city on call, or if it's during business hours, you can ask your community director or your assistant community director, or if they're out of the building, you can still call the CDOC phone, because there's always somebody on call. You can double check with them what's going on and what report you should submit. Now, in this case, for example, let's say that a resident has an animal or it's a pet violation where it's not been approved by the ODA, then you will write a report, which is the resident hall incident report. So the first link.
And the next step is to verify that the report that you are about to write is the correct one. And so say if there is an animal, like pet violation, you want to make sure that is under residence hall incident form. And you might be asking, well, what if there is a pet violation or roommate conflict and a flood that correlates with it? You're going to have to write 2 reports. So you'll be writing one under residence hall incident report as well as the maintenance report. And you can put in a report, adjoining report in the maintenance one. It's really important that you make sure that you put the correct information, like Marisol said, under the correct form, because once again, Craig probably doesn't want to see some resident hall incident, forms or some care reports, because it's not something that he needs to see. And then if you have any questions about which report to use, please don't be afraid to contact us. That's why we're here. And we understand it is a lot of information and situations can be difficult and can be different. And so if you ever have any questions on what report you should be writing, you can contact your CD or ACD during regular work hours, so before 5 p.m., or you can contact the CD on call in your area after 5 p.m.
So now that you're ready for writing the report, like you already checked the IR flowchart, you know exactly which one it is. You contact the city on call to double check that that's the correct one, and you're ready to start writing. Well, each report, like each column, once that you click on those links, it's going to ask you different questions. So make sure that once that you have access to the internet and you have access to the flowchart and those links, you visit those links beforehand, before you're on call, to make sure, or before your first shift, for example, if you're a part-time desk clerk and you're at the front desk, you visit those websites, get familiar to what information is asked from you, and like how will you answer in certain scenarios. You also have access to the emergency protocol. You want to read it. You want to make sure, like for example, the question that we had about writing IRs if a resident feels sick, it's addressed on the emergency protocol. So once that you start getting familiar with those situations that appear on the documents that we have provided for you, you're going to be feeling more comfortable to doing your job.
So step 1 is the background information. So this is what it's going to look like when you open incident report. So make sure to use your full name and not nicknames. So say I went by Ash. I don't, but let's say I did. I wouldn't be putting Ash Yzagguire. I'd be putting my full name, Ashley Yzagguire. For your title and position, I would be putting Assistant Community Director and not ACD. For my phone number, I would be putting dashes. Apparently this is very important. And so make sure to remember that is don't not leave spaces in between or don't use parentheses. Make sure to only use dashes in your number. And then for your email address, only use your work email because that's where potentially a copy of the incident report will be going. And so you don't want it sent to your personal email because it shouldn't be getting sent there, or your student email. So make sure to only use your work email. The date of the incident is when the incident occurred. So for example, like we used before, say yesterday, Timmy went to the rec and he hurt his ankle really, really badly, like he's really concerned, and he only came to talk to you the day after. I would put the date when the incident occurred, so the date that he hurt his ankle was yesterday, the 10th. And then the time when the incident occurred. So say if he said, oh, yesterday I went to the rec at 4 p.m. and I hurt my ankle really badly, but I tried to sleep it off, and then it still has been feeling really bad. And so I just wanted to let you know. I would put that the incident occurred yesterday on August 10th at 4 p.m. And then in the actual bio, I would say, resident Timmy came to talk to me today on August 11th at this time, but the incident occurred yesterday. Location of the
let me just add something else to that, and Ashley, and that is important because when I get these IRs and I see that the date is different from when you're speaking of, my question is going to be then why didn't you place the incident report in the day that it happened, right? And so that allows me to see that you as a staff member didn't find out about the incident until later on. So just be very careful about the dates that you put in, because sometimes I've seen staff members also not put dates into the system in this part up top of date of incident, and then it throws off timelines of when things occur. So the system will log it as like 1932 or somewhere date like that. So then it's hard for me to find in the IR sections of my database where the incident report is.
Thank you, Latoya. For the location of the incident, once again, it just depends on the timeline. So it's where the incident occurred, but for Timmy, I would put the rec center. That's where the incident occurred. The specific location, I probably wouldn't, or you shouldn't put anything because you don't know where in the rec center unless he tells you. But say there is an incident where there is a flood in Crumley, because I used to work there. For the location of the incident, I would put Crumley Hall, and the specific location, I would put where the incident occurred. So in room 126, there was a flood, or there was a roommate conflict in Joe Green, room 426. So just try to be as specific as possible if you do know that information. And if not, if you don't know the specific location, that's okay, just leave that area blank.
And with the information that Ashley and Latoya shared, we answer the question from West Hall. So again, if you do continue to have questions, just make sure to write them in the chat. Now, the step 2 is involved.
One more thing, I'm sorry. For the part about the location, if you are not sure where it occurred, in the body of your incident report, say that you do not know, that the resident didn't tell you where it occurred. So then I also know that in the back of my head as well.
Okay, so for the involved parties, you're going to make sure that you use the web roster for the name of the resident, or the ID, photo ID, when the person is not affiliated with UNT as a student or as a staff or something else like a resident. So I want to make sure that you write the name exactly as is written in the web roster or under photo ID. The select role, we will talk about it in a second. You have a couple options, and it does mention like the reporting party, the responsible witness, etc. But the other thing that you want to make sure is that you, thank you, Ashley. So you have the respondent, the witness, reporting, and other. This is something very important. When you're writing the report, staff members, we're never witnesses, like ever. I know that you will have other RAs responding. It might be, unless the RA is being arrested because they did something they shouldn't, or they are the ones who are being hospitalized, we are never witnesses, or I'm not the reporting party. CDOC, REOC, other RAs, part-time desk clerks, UNTPD, anybody who is assisting with this situation is never a witness unless that I fell and I'm a staff member, but still I fell and I'm taken to the hospital because I fell, then the person writing the report will include me as the respondent. So I'm the person, in this case, accused misconduct. This will not be the correct IR for that specific situation because I'm being transported. It's a different IR. However, you still have a specific select role. Now, for the ID number, you want to make sure that you use the web roster and you can copy paste. However, for the date of birth in the web roster on the intranet, it gives you month, day, and year. In the report, normally ask for year first. So you cannot copy paste the date of birth. You want to make sure that you actually type it.
And some more important information is the phone number. So like we said before, make sure to use dashes and make sure to use the cell phone number available on the web roster. This might not be the most up-to-date, we know that, but it is the one currently listed. And then for email address, these are the ways you can find a resident's email address because it's not listed on the intranet, is log into Outlook, click new email, click to, and search the individual's last name. And so say two people have the same first and last name. So say I'm looking for Marisol Gonzalez and I type in Gonzalez and Marisol, and two individuals pop up that say Marisol.Gonzalez 1, Marisol.Gonzalez 2. I would just leave that area blank because once again, we don't want to give out information to the wrong individual. So say if two individuals have the same first and last name or same email address, just leave that section of the reporting blank.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Ashley, if I can just add, there's something that you can ask the residents yourself when you're in the situation. You can like, hey, can I confirm your phone number? And they can give it to you. And can I confirm your student email address? And they can give it to you. However, if you forget, you always can use information as Ashley mentioned, go to your email account and try to find them that way. And if there's more than one person with the same name and last name, then you will leave it blank.
And then this is how you add another individual to the involved parties. So write the name of all individuals involved in the incident below, and then say if there are 3 residents involved, you will need to add another because I think it starts off with 2. So you'll just be clicking this little addition at the bottom that says add another, and you will list the correct information that we mentioned before.
So it says for non-UNT students, can we use a personal email? Yes. If they gave you their Yahoo or Hotmail or Gmail account, like if you asked them and they gave you that one, absolutely, you can definitely write that for them. Now for questions, remember when I mentioned that for each, on the flowchart for each column, you will have a different type of link and you will get different questions for each one of them. In this case, the first one is the regular housing IR. They ask you questions regarding like animal pet violation, about police in building, etc. So you want to make sure that you type the type of incident, you click on the boxes that apply to the scenario, and include in this case if it's Clery or not Clery. You will need to complete a Clery Campus Security Authority training on UNT Bridge, so you will know more about what Clery is. And again, if you have questions, you can always contact your community director and call, your assistant community director, call Latoya, Ashley, or myself, or other staff members. You just want to make sure that you probably, for Clery, you don't want to go to another RA for it. You want to go to your direct supervisor, in this case, your community director or your assistant community director. Now, for Clery, in this particular case, please don't leave it unchecked. You should say yes if that's the case, or no if it's not. However, don't click yes when it's no, and don't click no when it's yes. If you don't know, you have to contact the community director and call if it's like if your CD is out, or if it's after hours. But during the day, you can contact your community director and be like, I'm not completely sure, should I click it or not? So make sure that you take those steps, ask questions when you need to. We're here for you to support you.
So next is actually writing the incident report. So you're going to, like we said before, give a detailed description of the incident that occurred using specific, concise, objective languages, and title knowing the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And so like we said before, we're reiterating because it is important, try to write the report in Microsoft Word first because it's going to let you know of any typos and mistakes that you're making. And also, if Maxient stops working or crashes, hopefully a copy is saved because it's going to be on a completely separate platform. And then always start with the date, time, and location. So on Saturday, January 4th, 2020, at approximately 7:30 a.m. in Rollins Hall, Assistant Community Director Ashley Yzagguire was contacted by ... And then after the person title has been introduced the first time, you can start using acronyms like we've said before. Resident Assistant on Call Harry Potter can now go to RA on Call Harry Potter after, or RA on Call Potter after its first use. And then the most important, and why we keep saying it, is write in third person, write in third person, write in third person. So, yes.
So if one of the individuals, again, is not involved as or not associated with UNT, continue using their last name within the IR. So for example, Charlie Brown, or Charles Brown from Snoopy. So it will be non-UNT student or non-affiliated or UNT affiliated or just Charles Brown. And then when you continue talking about Charles Brown, it will only say Brown. This is just, however, make sure that the last names are not similar. For example, if you have two residents with the same last name because they're related, but one is a UNT student, but the other is not, then you probably will still have to use their whole name. It just depends on the situation. Just make sure that you're aware of it. And if you have questions, you can always ask. As Ashley mentioned, and I have mentioned before, and Latoya as well, please don't use pronouns. It makes it very hard for the other person or the person who's going to receive the report to follow up the narrative. This is awkward. Yes, it's very egocentric. However, it might help you to see the information from another person's point of view, and provide as many details as possible, including reference to other instances. So for example, let's say that you were on call for a weekend and your weekend on call, and you have a noise complaint on Friday, a noise complaint on Saturday, a noise complaint on Sunday, and for some reason you were also on call that following Thursday. Well, on that following Thursday, if you still got like a noise complaint, you want to make sure that you address that. Like I was on call, or resident assistant Marisol Gonzalez was on call during the weekend and specific date and times. There are already incident report written about this particular resident, etc. This is also important, for example, if you have a maintenance issue, let's say the resident, their AC unit is not working properly, but it's already marked as the work order has been completed and it's already like finished, but a month later, the resident is still complaining that the AC unit is not working properly. Well, we wanna make sure that we give the residents our best customer service. So we wanna make sure that we address that on the IR for maintenance. So Craig and his team can address it as soon as possible. So the next step is supporting documentation. So let's say that you get a resident, so in this case, we're following like Harry Potter and the team, right? So resident Hermione Granger informed resident assistant on call Harry Potter that resident Granger was being stalked by resident Ronald Weasley's girlfriend, Lavender Brown. So if that's the case, and in this case, resident Granger shares a print screen or a screenshot of the information received by Lavender Brown, you want to make sure that you include that information. Or in this case, RA Potter should include it on the report. They're going to mention how they got that information. So if it was shared through Microsoft Teams, they will mention that as well. And on the body of the narrative, you also want to make sure that you open a parenthesis and you include photo 1, close parenthesis. So you want to make sure that you reference the screenshot, the email, the text message, etc., on the body of the parentheses and on the body of the IR, and also included as an attachment.
And the last step is to make sure to select email me a copy of this report. This is an easy way to confirm that the report was submitted properly to all the correct parties, as well as if something goes wrong with the system. So like I said before, I was on call the first week of move-in and there was a flood in Kerr, unfortunately, and I completed my incident report writing and I emailed myself a copy, or I think it was another incident. And the people who were supposed to receive the information did not receive it. So I was able to say, well, that's okay. I have my copy of the email, so let me just send that to the appropriate areas. Because once again, technology is iffy sometimes, and sometimes things do happen, but at least you can say, well, I have this email, just in case if anything does go wrong. And then always remember that sexual misconduct reports must be deleted from your inbox within 3 days. That is really, really important. So please keep that in mind. If you do write a sexual misconduct report and you do say, email me a copy of this report just in case, you know, if anything does happen, it must be deleted from your inbox within 3 days because you shouldn't be keeping that information at all. So please keep that in mind.
So we're going to go over a very simple example. You will have time to go over this information more in detail with your staff, with your communities, but make sure that you, again, ask questions if you have them. In this case, if we can go to the next one, please, Ashley. So we have the date, time, and staff and residents involved. So this information that you should always have when you're ready to write the report. So the incident already occurred. I already know when it happened, who was involved, at what time, and I went to the web roster to look for that information. So I know that all of them are residents, so I can go and check their date of birth, their room number, etc. So in this case, we have on Wednesday, January 1st, 2020, time is 12:30 a.m. Staff, resident assistant on call, Draco Malfoy, and the community director on call is Remus Lupin. Now the residents are Seamus Finnegan, Hermione Granger, and Ronald Weasley. All of them are, well, one of them is a Rollins resident, two of them are Mozart. We do have a date of birth that we obtained from the web roster. We have phone numbers that we ask them, and we also verify through the web roster, and the email address because we also asked them and or we found through the way that Ashley explained earlier. Now, this is very important for you to notice that the date of birth, all of them in this case are under 21. And it is important to double check when there's residents like drinking in the hall, that you double check that they're allowed or not allowed to be consuming alcohol. And that's an emergency protocol. We do have a section for alcohol. So make sure that you verify that information you read, you are familiar with it. Also, if you're doing rounds and you hear multiple people in a room, you smell the alcohol, you hear like clinking of, I don't know, glasses, etc. So you know that you probably will need assistance or other RAs with you, so you call for backup. At the same time, you want to make sure that you're familiar with the procedure before you actually knock on the room. So that's why we told you how you can access the protocol from your cell phone. Okay, so the IR, again, we already have the day, the time, and staff. And let's say that RAOC Malfoy is already ready, like the situation already happened and is ready to write it. So he wrote, on Monday, resident assistant Draco Malfoy received a call about a loud room in Rollins Street 33. Upon arriving to the room, he discovered residents Seamus Finnegan, Hermione Granger, and Ronald Weasley consuming alcohol. RAOC Malfoy instructed the residents to pour out the alcohol. RA Malfoy left the scene and completed this IR. Now, will anybody please take a minute and think about it? Do you think this is a correct IR? Like for RAs who are returners, do you think this is a correct IR? What will you have done differently? Is there anything that it was misspelled or there's information that was not included? What do you guys think?
So they used the pronoun in it.
Yes.
Instead of using the resident assistant Malfoy.
That is correct. Yes, thank you. Also, somebody also shared the day and time, so it was not included. That is correct. So we want to make sure that it says Wednesday, January 1st, 2020, the time. So it's exactly at 12:30 a.m. And of course, like the pronouns are very important. Just keep that in mind. The report is definitely not detailed enough. That's correct. Like we don't know, according to your protocol, different things might have happened, right? And some of you are not familiar with our emergency protocol yet, but you will get familiar with it, so don't worry. But this is too small for the type of situation that happened. Like it's one paragraph is not enough probably. Sometimes, remember, we want to make sure that we provide as many details as possible. What type of alcohol they were consuming, how many bottles, is there a specific amount they were drinking, were there other people involved in the incident, etc. So somebody mentioned that the title is different. So yes, we want to make sure that we're consistent. So if we're talking about RAOC, we want to maintain the RAOC over the whole type of writing the report.
Awesome. So now I'm going to be going over the IR corrections. And if you see any mistakes as well, make sure to either say them out loud or list them in the chat. So on Wednesday, January 1st, 2020 at 12:30 a.m., resident assistant on call Draco Malfoy received a call about a loud room in Rollins 333. Upon arriving to the room, RA on call Malfoy could smell the aroma of alcohol before knocking on the door. After knocking for about 3 minutes, resident Seamus Finnegan opened the door and identified themselves as the resident of the room. RA on call Malfoy explained they had received a complaint about loud music and could also smell alcohol. Resident Finnegan explained they were drinking with a few friends. RA on call Malfoy noticed 2 other individuals in the room. RA on call Malfoy asked for everyone's student or photo ID. Residents Finnegan, Hermione Granger, and Ronald Weasley complied and apologized for consuming alcohol in the room. Since the residents were underage, RA on call Malfoy asked the residents to place all of the alcohol in the middle of the room, in which 3 empty 12-ounce cans of Bud Light, 1 half-empty bottle of Bacardi, and 3 red Solo cups were placed on the floor. RA on call Malfoy asked resident Finnegan to pour out the Bacardi and the alcohol in the 3 Solo cups and place the items inside a dark plastic bag. RA on call Malfoy escorted resident Finnegan to throw away the items. RA on call Malfoy then informed the 3 residents that the incident would be documented. RA on call Malfoy then left the scene, contacted community director on call Remus Lupin, and completed the incident report.
So this is all that we have for you guys. We know it's a lot of information, so you must make sure that go back to the slides, go back to the video when you have a moment to listen to it again. Make sure that you always ask questions. We're always here for you. You have your community director, your assistant community director. You also have assistant director for your areas as well as other RAs. So if you're a rookie RA, make sure that find our veteran RA who can tell you a little bit more of like how to handle certain situations. However, we want to make sure that before you ask those questions, go to your resources, visit the internet, look at the IR flow chart, get familiar with the internet, with how to find information on the web roster, as well as the emergency protocol. So use that the information that we have given you in order to make those critical thinking skills, use those skills in order to address the situation the better as you can. Always when in doubt, ask. You are allowed to call. That's why you are on call and then somebody else on call with you. And sometimes when we're on call as CDOCs, we also call the ADOC, so we have questions as well. So it's important that you know that it's okay not to know the information, it's okay not to know what to do. However, when you call, you wanna make sure that you do mention which hall you're calling, your name and maybe last name, so we know like, okay, Ashley's calling me, so I know Ashley, it's a Joe Green, so I make sure that when I answer, it's going to say RAOC Ashley from Joe Green. So I make sure that I know who I'm speaking with, because it's also important for writing reports anyways. I will need that information as well. At the same time, as you address that, you want to make sure that, okay, I don't know how to address the situation. However, I do have certain information that I can share with you. This happened at Joe Green, a certain day, certain time. You don't have to, depending on the situation, you don't want to share too much like for example, let's say it's a Title IX situation, so I definitely don't need to know names or room numbers or ID numbers or anything like that. However, you do need my assistance, I will go to the hall and assist you that way. So it depends on what type of a scenario you encounter, then that's the way that you will address. And depending on the situation, if there's a flood and you say like, okay, it happened at Mozart on the first floor near the, I don't know, like the kitchen. So with that information, as a CDOC, I can contact maintenance and give that information. So even if you don't know what to do, you still want to make sure that you have certain details that you will share with the person that you're contacting with. Now, if you have questions, as we have mentioned, make sure that you speak with your CD, make sure that you speak with your ACD. Ashley and my email are on this slide, so make sure that you contact us if you need information. We're always here for assistance if you need to.
So yes, if you have any questions, please list them in the chat and we will either answer them now or get back to you on answer. You'll be hearing us again because we are going to be presenting the incident confrontation and problem solving, but it is a YouTube video, so I believe you could do it on your own time. But thank you all so much for listening and for paying attention. We really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, please let us know.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to stop the recording, and then I will also share about the incident confrontation video and a couple other things. There is a question about the new guest policy and doing IRs for that in the chat. You can, yes, you can complete IRs for non-compliance. Obviously, it's very similar to doing any noise violations. You talk to them first. If they are not complying, then you would complete an IR. Okay, so, oh, I said I was going to stop the recording, but I didn't.